The acid rain of Calder Station dripped through the ceiling again, creating a slow, maddening rhythm on the metal grates below. Rain Corman adjusted his breathing apparatus and descended deeper into Sector 8, where the station's lowest decks reeked of rust and waste oil. The air here was thick with moisture that had nowhere to go, condensing on every surface until it ran in rivulets down corroded walls. Rain was used to the smell by now. 3 years as a soil technician on this forgotten outpost had deadened his senses to most unpleasantness. Once, he had been an ecological diplomat, speaking on behalf of indigenous species across multiple colonies. Now, he collected soil samples from the underbelly of humanity's expansion into the stars. "Hey, Corman, we've got a blockage in the drainage system again," called Mendez, one of the maintenance workers. His voice echoed across the cavernous space where ceiling lights flickered weakly. "Need those samples from the filter bed before we purge the system." Rain nodded, adjusting his tool belt. "I'll be quick. Just need the bacterial count from the sediment layer." The drainage system was a remnant of the station's original design, back when Calder was meant to be a prestigious waypoint between core worlds. Now, it served as the dumping ground for industrial waste and sewage from the upper levels. Rain knelt beside the access hatch, his knees pressing into the perpetually damp floor. "Don't know why they bother with samples anymore," muttered another worker, a stocky woman named Vega. "Place is toxic as hell. Just waiting for the whole sector to be condemned." Rain didn't respond. He knew better than most that the samples weren't for improvement. They were documentation for corporate liability protection, evidence that someone had checked the boxes before the inevitable evacuation order came down. He unsealed the drainage hatch and was immediately hit with the acrid stench of stagnant water and chemical runoff. Pulling a collection tube from his bag, he prepared to lower himself into the narrow opening. That's when he heard it, a faint rustling sound from within the drainage tunnel. Rain froze, listening carefully. The station had its share of vermin, but this sounded different, larger. "You hear that?" he asked. Mendez shrugged. "Probably just the system settling. These old pipes shift all the time." But Rain knew better. He'd spent enough time on alien worlds to recognize the sound of something moving with purpose. He pulled his light closer to the opening, illuminating the dark passage below. A sudden splash of movement made him jerk backward. The workers behind him laughed nervously. "What the hell was that?" Vega asked, taking a step back. Before Rain could answer, a form began to emerge from the drainage pipe. At first, it looked like nothing more than a pile of waste matter, dark, slick with mud, and unidentifiable fluids. But as it pulled itself up through the narrow opening, Rain saw the unmistakable outline of limbs, a body. The workers behind him gasped collectively. "Is that a—" Mendez couldn't finish his sentence. The creature crawled completely out of the pipe now, its body covered in a thick layer of dark sludge that dripped onto the floor. Through the muck, Rain could make out delicate fingers, webbed between the joints, and the subtle shimmer of scales beneath the filth. The shape of the head, though obscured, was unmistakable. "It's a Mayari," Rain whispered, his voice barely audible. The Mayari were an aquatic species, indigenous to several water-rich moons in the outer systems. They were rare now, their numbers decimated by colonization and exploitation. Rain had seen them before, during his diplomatic days. But never like this. Never in such a state of degradation. The small crowd of workers that had gathered began to murmur among themselves. Some took steps back in disgust. "God, it's disgusting," said one man, his face contorted in revulsion. "Look at that thing." "Too dirty to even touch," another added, laughing cruelly. "Probably been living in the sewage." The Mayari seemed disoriented, its head swiveling slowly as it took in its surroundings. When its gaze landed on the circle of humans, it recoiled slightly, webbed hands sliding across the wet floor as if seeking an escape route. Something in Rain's chest tightened painfully. Without thinking, he removed his outer jacket, the only clean, dry thing in this forsaken place, and took a step forward. "What are you doing, Corman?" Vega asked, alarm in her voice. "Don't touch it. Could be diseased." Rain ignored her. He approached the Mayari slowly, crouching down to appear less threatening. The creature watched him with large, luminous eyes that gleamed through the layer of filth. Rain recognized fear in those eyes, a universal emotion that crossed species boundaries. "It's okay," he said softly, extending the jacket toward the Mayari. "I'm not going to hurt you." The Mayari didn't move, its chest rising and falling rapidly with shallow breaths. Rain noticed how thin it was beneath the mud, ribs visible through the slime-coated skin. Despite the filth, he could see this was a female, smaller in stature than the males of her species, with more delicate features. "Corman, station regulations prohibit interaction with unregistered lifeforms," Mendez warned. "You know the protocols." Rain knew them all too well. Unregistered aliens were to be reported, contained, and usually transferred to research facilities or, worse, private collectors. The rules existed to protect humans from potential biological threats. But Rain had seen how they were truly applied, as justification for exploitation and cruelty. "I'm taking her to my module," Rain announced, his decision made in an instant. "She needs medical attention."
"Are you insane?" Vega exclaimed. "That thing is waste. It's been living in the drainage system, for God's sake."
Rain turned to face the small crowd, something hardening in his expression. "She's a Mayari, a sentient being, not waste." Before anyone could protest further, Rain carefully draped his jacket over the trembling Mayari's shoulders. She flinched at the contact, but didn't pull away. With gentle movements, he helped her to her feet. She was unsteady, leaning heavily against him, but she allowed him to guide her. "This is a serious violation," Mendez called after him, as Rain led the Mayari toward the exit. "I'll have to report this. Corman!" Rain didn't look back.
"Do what you have to do."
The walk to his residential module was tense. Rain could feel the stares of other station workers as he guided the mud-covered Mayari through the corridors. He kept his arm protectively around her shoulders, feeling how she trembled against him. His residential module was located in a quiet corner of Sector 8, away from the main thoroughfares. It was small, just a sleeping area, minimal kitchen, and hygiene facility, but it was private. As soon as they were inside, Rain engaged the security lock on his door, a rare precaution he normally didn't bother with. The Mayari stood just inside the entrance, Rain's jacket still draped over her shoulders, dripping mud onto the floor. She seemed uncertain, her large eyes darting around the unfamiliar space. "You're safe here," Rain said, keeping his voice low and calm. "No one will hurt you." He moved slowly to the small kitchen area and filled a cup with clean water. When he offered it to her, the Mayari stared at it for a long moment before reaching out with trembling, webbed fingers. She brought the cup to her lips and drank with desperate thirst, water spilling down her mud-caked chin. Rain watched her, memories flooding back unbidden. Kesson 3. The Mayari settlement there. The diplomatic mission that had gone so terribly wrong. He had filed reports, submitted evidence of the impending genocide, and when the council had denied his petition for intervention, he had done nothing, said nothing, walked away. The Mayari finished the water and held the empty cup awkwardly, as if unsure what to do with it. "Would you like more?" Rain asked. She nodded almost imperceptibly. It was the first clear communication between them, and Rain felt a small flicker of hope. He refilled the cup and watched as she drank again, more slowly this time. "I need to get you cleaned up," he said, gesturing to the bathroom. "The mud. It might be toxic." The Mayari followed his gaze to the small hygiene chamber, but made no move toward it. Rain hesitated, then asked, "Do you understand me? Do you speak common?" Again, a slight nod, but she remained silent, clutching his jacket around her thin frame. "May I?" Rain gestured to the bathroom again. "Help you?" After a long pause, the Mayari took a tentative step forward. Rain led her to the small bathroom, activated the water system, and adjusted the temperature to warm. Mayari preferred warmer environments than humans typically did. "I'll wait outside while you clean up," he said, reaching for the door. But the Mayari's hand shot out, grasping his wrist with surprising strength. Her eyes, wide and frightened, conveyed a clear message. "Don't leave." Rain nodded slowly. "All right, I'll stay." He helped her remove his mud-soaked jacket, setting it aside. Then, with careful movements, he guided her to the shower stall. The Mayari hesitated at the threshold, staring at the flowing water with an unreadable expression. "It's just water," Rain assured her. "Clean water." Still, she didn't move. Rain realized with a pang of sadness that she might not have seen clean water in a very long time. Gently, he took her hand and guided it under the stream. The Mayari's reaction was immediate, a sharp intake of breath, followed by a shudder that ran through her entire body. As the water ran over her hand, rivulets of mud began to wash away, revealing iridescent blue-green scales beneath. The Mayari watched with what looked like wonder as her true skin emerged from beneath the filth. Slowly, tentatively, she stepped fully into the shower. Rain stayed nearby, ready to help if needed, but giving her space to acclimate. The mud sloughed off her body in thick streams, swirling around the drain. Beneath it all, the Mayari's natural form began to emerge, slender and graceful, with skin that shifted between shades of blue and green depending on how the light hit it. As the last of the mud washed away, the Mayari turned her face directly into the water stream. Her eyes closed, mouth slightly open. A sound escaped her, something between a sigh and a word. Rain thought he heard Surilvar, but couldn't be certain. When she finally stepped out of the shower, the transformation was stunning. Her skin gleamed with a pearlescent quality, delicate gills fluttering at the sides of her neck. She was young, Rain realized, probably no more than the equivalent of 20 human years. Her large, almond-shaped eyes were a deep violet, regarding him with cautious intelligence. Rain handed her a clean towel, which she accepted with more confidence than before. As she dried herself, he went to his storage unit and found the softest clothing he owned, a simple tunic and loose pants that might fit her smaller frame. "Here," he offered when he returned. "These should be comfortable." The Mayari took the clothes, examining them curiously before slipping them on. They were too large, hanging loosely on her slight frame, but they were clean and dry. "Are you hungry?" Rain asked. A nod. Rain prepared a simple meal, a warm grain porridge with mild seasoning. He remembered from his diplomatic training that Mayari had sensitive digestive systems and preferred bland, soft foods when stressed. The Mayari sat at his small table, watching his every movement. When he placed the bowl before her, she inhaled the steam rising from it, her gills fluttering in what Rain recognized as a sign of pleasure. She ate slowly at first, then with increasing hunger, until the bowl was empty. Rain refilled it without comment, and she ate that portion too. "My name is Rain," he said as she finished eating. "Rain Corman." The Mayari looked up at him, a flicker of recognition in her eyes at the sound of his name. Then, in a voice rough from disuse, but melodic nonetheless, she spoke her first words to him.
Ilara."
Rain smiled, genuinely pleased. "Ilara, is that your name?" She nodded, then corrected herself. "Part of name." "It's a beautiful name," Rain said. "It's good to meet you, Ilara." A shadow crossed her face. "Long time, no name. Use mud, hide." Rain nodded, understanding beginning to dawn. "You were hiding in the mud, in the drainage system." "Yes." Her webbed fingers traced patterns on the table. "Mud mask, like Mother taught. Hide from hunters. Hunters? Rain's stomach tightened. Who's hunting you? Ilara's gills flattened against her neck, a sign of distress. Men who take, sell. Others like me, taken. Mother. Her voice faltered. Mother used mud last, so I escape. The implication was clear. Ilara's mother had sacrificed herself, using the mud disguise to distract whoever was hunting them, allowing her daughter to escape. How long have you been hiding in the drainage system? Rain asked gently. Ilara's brow furrowed. Many cycles, lost count. Rain tried to process this. Calder Station measured time in standard cycles, each equivalent to about 40 Earth days. If she had been hiding for many cycles, it could mean months, or even years living in toxic sludge, barely surviving. You're safe now, Rain assured her, though he wasn't certain he could keep that promise. No one will hurt you here. Ilara regarded him with those penetrating violet eyes. Why help? Humans. Not help Miari. The question struck Rain like a physical blow. Why indeed? After Kesson 3, after what he had witnessed and failed to prevent, why would any Miari trust his help? I was on Kesson 3, he admitted, the words difficult to form. I was a diplomatic representative. I tried to stop what happened there, but I failed. I filed reports about the planned relocation, the genocide, but the council denied my petition, and I just accepted it. I walked away. Ilara watched him silently, her expression unreadable. I should have done more, Rain continued. I should have spoken out, gone public with what I knew, but I didn't. And I've carried that with me every day since. A long silence stretched between them. Then Ilara spoke, her voice soft but clear. Niall, my mother's sister. She was speaker for Miari on Kesson 3. Rain's breath caught. Niall had been the last Miari diplomat he'd spoken with before the settlement was destroyed. A tall, dignified female with wisdom in her ancient eyes. You're Niall's niece. Ilara nodded. She speak of human diplomat. Who have Rain name. Before Rain could process the implications of this connection, a soft chime sounded from his communication terminal. He frowned. He rarely received messages, and moved to check it. What he saw made his blood run cold. A security alert was scrolling across the screen. Unauthorized biological entity detected in Sector 8. All personnel report sightings. Below this was a grainy image captured from a corridor camera, showing Rain guiding the mud-covered Miari toward his quarters. The timestamp was from less than an hour ago. They're looking for you, Rain said, turning to Ilara with renewed urgency. Station security. Fear flashed across Ilara's features. Her gills flattened against her neck again. Hunters use station. Pay for fine Miari. Traffickers, Rain realized aloud. Using station security to track rare species. He'd heard rumors of the black market for exotic beings. Collectors who paid fortunes for rare specimens, especially those from worlds that had been environmentally devastated, or populations that had been nearly wiped out. A Miari would be valuable indeed, one of the last of her kind. We need to be careful, Rain said, quickly disabling his module's external monitoring systems. It was against regulations, but he couldn't risk anyone seeing Ilara through the standard security feeds. Stay away from the windows and doors. Ilara nodded, moving deeper into the small living space. I know hide. Rain spent the next few hours securing his module as best he could. He disabled additional monitoring systems, rigged a simple alert that would warn him if anyone approached his door, and gathered emergency supplies, food, medical items, a portable purifier for water. As night cycle approached, Ilara grew visibly tired. The stress of the day, coupled with the first proper meal and clean water she'd had in who knew how long, was taking its toll. You should rest, Rain told her, preparing the sleeping area for her. Take the bed. I'll sleep here. He gestured to the small sitting area. Ilara hesitated, then asked in her halting speech, "Safe to sleep?" The question broke something in Rain's heart. "Yes," he promised. "I'll keep watch. You're safe to sleep." She nodded gratefully and curled onto the bed, her slender body forming a tight ball beneath the blanket. Within minutes, her breathing had deepened into sleep. Rain watched her for a moment, struck by the strange turn his life had taken in a single day. Then he settled into the chair by the door, preparing for a long night. He must have dozed off despite his intentions, because the next thing he knew, a violent pounding on his door jerked him awake. Ilara was already up, pressed against the far wall, her eyes wide with terror. "Corman, open up!" The voice belonged to Station Security Officer Hernandez. "We know you've got an unregistered alien in there." Rain signaled Ilara to stay quiet and moved to the door communication panel. "It's the middle of night cycle. Hernandez, what's this about?" "Don't play dumb. Corman, we've got your image on security feeds with an unauthorized Mayari. Open the door now, or we'll override the lock." Rain's mind raced. Station security wouldn't normally care this much about an unregistered alien. Not enough to raid a residence module during night cycle. This confirmed Ilara's claim. Someone was paying them to find her. "I need to see authorization," Rain stalled. "Wake up Chief Townsend and have him contact me directly. Last warning, Corman." Rain turned to Ilara, speaking in an urgent whisper. "Is there somewhere you can hide? Just for a few minutes while I deal with them?" Ilara's gaze darted around the small module, then fixed on a spot beneath the floor near the hygiene chamber. "There," she whispered back. "Maintenance access. I feel airflow." Rain was startled. He'd forgotten about the maintenance crawlspace beneath his module. It had been sealed when he moved in, deemed unnecessary for resident access. But Ilara, with her heightened senses, had detected it. He helped her lift the small section of flooring, revealing a narrow passage below. "Stay there until I come for you," he instructed. Ilara slipped into the space with fluid grace, her body perfectly adapted to navigating tight passages. The last thing Rain saw before replacing the floor panel was her violet eyes, watching him with a mixture of fear and trust. The pounding on the door grew more insistent. Rain took a deep breath, composing himself, then pressed the access panel. The door slid open to reveal 3 men. Only one wore the uniform of station security. The other 2 were dressed in nondescript clothing that couldn't hide their predatory demeanor. Traffickers, just as Ilara had warned. "Officer Hernandez," Rain greeted the security man with forced calm. "And guests, what can I do for you at this hour?" Hernandez looked uncomfortable, avoiding Rain's eyes. "These gentlemen have proper authorization to collect unregistered life forms on the station." "Really?" Rain leaned against the doorframe, blocking their view into his module. "I'd like to see that authorization." One of the traffickers, a tall, gaunt man with a cybernetic eye implant, stepped forward. "We don't have time for this. The Mayari. Where is it?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Rain replied evenly. The second trafficker, shorter but powerfully built, pushed past Hernandez. "Search the place," he ordered, as if he had the authority to do so. Rain stood his ground. "You have no right to enter my private quarters without proper—" He never finished the sentence. The taller trafficker moved with unexpected speed, shoving Rain backward into the module. The 3 men forced their way in, the door sliding shut behind them. "We know it's here," the tall one said, pulling out a neural stunner, an illegal weapon on most civilized stations. "The mud-covered Mayari female. Extremely valuable, particularly to our employer." Rain's combat training from his diplomatic days rushed back to him. He assessed his opponents quickly. 3 against 1. At least 2 armed. Not good odds. But he had home advantage and surprise on his side. "There's no one here but me," Rain insisted, shifting his weight subtly, preparing to move. The shorter trafficker was already searching the sleeping area, tearing apart the bedding. Hernandez hung back near the door, looking increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. "Check the bathroom," the tall one ordered his partner, keeping the stunner trained on Rain. As the shorter man moved toward the hygiene chamber, Rain knew he had to act. If they found the access panel, Alara would be trapped. He lunged suddenly, not at the man with the weapon, but at the light control panel on the wall. His fingers found the emergency override, and the module plunged into darkness. In the sudden blackness, Rain moved with precision. He ducked low, sweeping his leg in an arc that caught the tall trafficker at the ankles. The man went down hard, the stunner clattering across the floor. A shout from the shorter trafficker, followed by the distinctive hum of another weapon activating. Rain rolled, narrowly avoiding a bolt of energy that sizzled past his ear. What happened next? Rain couldn't have predicted. A section of flooring erupted upward, and Alara emerged from the maintenance crawl space like a creature from the deep. In the dim emergency lighting that had activated, her movements were a blur of fluid grace. She launched herself at the shorter trafficker, her webbed hands finding his face. The man screamed as Alara's fingers pressed into specific points, a Mayari combat technique Rain had only heard about. The trafficker collapsed, his body seizing with temporary paralysis. Rain had no time to be amazed. The tall trafficker was recovering, scrabbling for his dropped weapon. Rain dove for it, his fingers closing around the handle seconds before his opponent could reach it. "Stop!" Rain commanded, now holding the stunner on the trafficker. "It's over!" But the tall man wasn't finished. He pulled a secondary weapon from his boot, a thermal blade that glowed red-hot in the dim light. With a snarl of rage, he lunged at Rain. The blade sliced through the air where Rain had been standing a split second earlier. Rain pivoted, using the trafficker's momentum against him, and brought the stunner down hard on the back of the man's neck. There was a crack of discharge, and the trafficker crumpled to the floor. Rain turned to find Hernandez standing frozen by the door, his own weapon drawn, but held indecisively. The security officer's eyes darted between Rain, the fallen traffickers, and Alara, who stood poised for another attack if necessary. "Hernandez," Rain said calmly, "you have a choice to make right now. You can be part of the problem, or you can do the right thing." Before the officer could respond, a commotion sounded in the corridor outside. The module door slid open, and two more figures rushed in, but not traffickers. Rain recognized them as Jorgen and Nikki, miners who worked in the level below his. They must have heard the commotion. "What the hell is going on?" Jorgen demanded, taking in the scene with wide eyes. Rain opened his mouth to explain, but a sudden, sharp pain in his side made him stumble. Looking down, he saw blood seeping through his shirt. The thermal blade had caught him after all. A glancing wound he hadn't felt in the adrenaline of the moment. "Rain!" Alara cried out, rushing to his side as he sank to his knees. The room spun slightly, and Rain felt the warmth of blood spreading across his abdomen. The last thing he saw before consciousness slipped away was Alara's face above him. Her violet eyes, filled with concern, her webbed hands pressing against his wound to stop the bleeding. Rain awoke to the sensation of gentle pressure on his side. He opened his eyes to find himself on his own bed, Alara sitting beside him, carefully applying some kind of salve to his wound. "You're awake," she said, her voice stronger and more confident than before. Rain tried to sit up, wincing at the pain. "What happened? How long was I out?" "Not long. Minutes only." Alara gently pushed him back down. "Stay still. Wound needs close." Rain looked down at his side. The thermal blade had left a nasty gash, but it wasn't as deep as he had feared. Alara had cleaned it and was applying what looked like a mixture of medical gel from his emergency kit and something else, a pale blue substance he didn't recognize. "What is that?" he asked, gesturing to the salve. "Mayari healing. From my skin." She held up her wrist, showing a small abrasion where she had apparently scraped away some of her own protective mucus. "Will help," Prevent infection. Rain nodded, oddly touched by the gesture. Thank you. And the traffickers? Gone, came a gruff voice from across the room. Jorgen stood there, arms crossed over his broad chest. We convinced Officer Hernandez it would be better for everyone if he took his associates and left. Told him we'd forget about the whole illegal raid if he did the same. Nikki, standing beside him, nodded. Those traffickers were bad news. Hernandez was just greedy and stupid. Rain was surprised by their intervention.
Why did you help us?
Jorgen shrugged. We miners stick together, and we don't like security overstepping. Besides, he added, glancing at Alara, we've heard stories about what happens to specimens those traffickers collect. No one deserves that fate. Alara finished dressing Rain's wound and sat back, her expression solemn. They will return. With more. Always do. Rain knew she was right. The traffickers now knew exactly where to find her, and next time, they wouldn't be caught off guard. The station wasn't safe for her anymore, and after tonight, it wasn't safe for him either. We need to leave Calder Station, Rain said, the decision forming even as he spoke the words. Both of us. Ilara's eyes widened.
Leave? How?
Jorgen stepped forward. If you're serious, there's a transport docking in 6 hours. Unofficial cargo ship heading to the Outer Rim. Captain owes me a favor. Can you get us on board? Rain asked. Maybe, Jorgen replied. But you'd need to move fast, and you can't take much with you. Rain exchanged a glance with Alara. We don't need much. The next few hours passed in a blur of careful preparation. Rain gathered only the essentials: medical supplies, emergency rations, his savings chip, a small data tablet with his personal files. Alara required even less, having lived with nothing for so long. Jorgen returned just before dawn cycle with news. It's arranged. The captain will take you both to Aguar 6. It's a small moon, former mining outpost, mostly abandoned now. Not much there, but it's off the main transit routes. You should be safe. Thank you, Rain said, gripping the miner's hand firmly. I won't forget this. Just take care of each other, Jorgen replied, his gaze shifting between Rain and Alara. And maybe someday, when things change, you can come back. Nikki had mapped out a route to the docking bay that avoided most security cameras. They would need to move through maintenance tunnels and service corridors, passages that Alara, with her experience navigating the station's underbelly, knew well. As they prepared to leave, Alara stood in the center of Rain's module, looking around the small space that had briefly been a sanctuary for her. First safe place, she said softly. Long time. Rain touched her shoulder gently. We'll find another, a better one. She turned to him, her violet eyes searching his face. Why risk? For me? Rain considered the question carefully. On Kesson 3, I failed to act when it mattered most. I told myself there was nothing I could do, that I was just following protocol. But the truth is, I was afraid. I've carried that regret ever since. He paused, meeting her gaze directly. I won't make the same mistake twice. Ilara's gills fluttered in what Rain now recognized as deep emotion. Without words, she reached out and took his hand, her webbed fingers intertwining with his. The gesture said more than words could have. The journey through the station's hidden passages was tense but uneventful. Alara moved with natural stealth, her body perfectly adapted to slipping through narrow spaces. Rain followed, ignoring the persistent ache in his side where the wound was still healing. When they reached the cargo bay, Jorgen was waiting with a tall, weathered woman, presumably the ship's captain. This them? She asked, eyeing Rain and Alara critically. Jorgen nodded. They can pay. The captain's gaze lingered on Alara. Miari. Haven't seen one in years. Thought they were all gone. Not all, Alara replied, straightening her posture, a hint of pride in her voice. A flicker of something, respect, perhaps, crossed the captain's face. All right. Cargo holds through there. It's not comfortable, but it's pressurized. We lift off in 20 minutes. Don't make noise, don't touch anything, and we'll get along fine. They boarded without incident, finding space among secured containers in the ship's hold. As the engines rumbled to life, Rain felt a strange mixture of emotions: relief at escaping, anxiety about their uncertain future, and underneath it all, a sense of rightness he hadn't felt in years. Beside him, Ilara pressed close, seeking warmth and reassurance as the ship shuddered through departure procedures. Rain put his arm around her shoulders, and they sat in silence as Calder Station fell away behind them. The journey to Aguar 6 took 3 standard days. They spent most of it in the cargo hold, emerging only when the captain deemed it safe. Food was basic but adequate, and they had a small alcove with privacy curtains for sleeping and washing. On the final day, the captain invited them to the bridge to see their destination as they approached. Through the view screen, Aguar 6 appeared as a small, dusty moon orbiting a gas giant. Its surface was mostly barren, with scattered patches of what might have been vegetation. "Not much to look at," the captain commented. "But there's a functional atmosphere, some water sources, and the old mining outpost has working shelter modules. Corporation pulled out 15 years ago when the ore veins ran dry. Left everything behind. Too expensive to salvage." "Are there other people?" Rain asked. The captain shrugged. "Couple of hermits. Research team that comes through once a year to check readings. Otherwise, it's all yours." When they landed, the captain helped them unload the few supplies they had brought and added a few extras: a portable power generator, some basic tools, emergency beacon if things went wrong. "Good luck," she said as she prepared to depart. "Next supply ship passes by in about 6 months. I'll tell them to watch for your signal if you need anything." And then they were alone, standing in the dust of Aguar 6 as the cargo ship lifted off behind them. The old mining outpost was a cluster of prefabricated modules arranged in a rough circle around what had once been a central processing facility. Time and the harsh environment had taken their toll. Some structures were collapsed entirely, others barely standing, but a few of the living quarters remained relatively intact. Rain and Ilara chose the sturdiest-looking module and set about making it habitable. The environmental system still functioned on backup power, and with the generator the captain had provided, they were able to restore basic life support: heat, air filtration, water recycling. That first night on Aguar 6, they sat together on the module's small viewing platform, watching the gas giant rise enormous and striated with bands of amber and crimson on the horizon. The air was thin but breathable, carrying a mineral scent that reminded Rain of desert worlds he had visited during his diplomatic days.
"It's beautiful," Ilara said softly. "Different, but beautiful."
Rain nodded.
"It's a new start for both of us."
She turned to him, her violet eyes reflecting the glow of the gas giant. "You gave up everything. For stranger, for enemy." "You're not my enemy," Rain said firmly. "You never were. And sometimes, giving up one life is the only way to begin another." Ilara's gills fluttered in that expressive way of hers. "On Kesson 3, before end, Niall tell me about human diplomat, with Rain name. She say, he have good heart, just trapped in bad system." Rain felt a lump form in his throat.
"I wish I had done more for her, for all of you."
"You do now," Ilara said simply. "For me, not memory, real." In that moment, something shifted between them, an acknowledgement of connection that transcended their different species, their different experiences. Rain reached out, hesitantly, and Ilara met his hand halfway, their fingers intertwining. The days on Aguar 6 took on a rhythm. Each morning, they explored their surroundings a little further, mapping water sources, identifying which native plants might be edible, salvaging useful materials from the abandoned outpost. To Rain's surprise, The mining corporation had left behind several agricultural modules, small, hydroponics bays designed to grow fresh produce for the miners. Most were damaged beyond repair, but two remained salvageable. With careful work, they managed to restart the systems and plant some of the emergency ration seeds Rain had brought. Ilara proved to have an intuitive understanding of growing things. Her species had evolved in symbiosis with aquatic plants, and she seemed to sense what each seedling needed to thrive in the artificial environment. "Water song different here," she explained, when Rain commented on her natural ability. "But still understand. Plants speak through water." As weeks passed, their small sanctuary began to take shape. The living module became more comfortable, decorated with interesting rocks and crystalline formations they found on their explorations. The hydroponics bays flourished under Ilara's care, producing fresh greens and root vegetables that supplemented their rations. They discovered a network of shallow caves in a nearby ridge that contained underground pools, the remnants of what had once been a more extensive water system on the moon. The water was mineral-rich and slightly warm, perfect for Ilara, who needed to immerse herself periodically to maintain her health. Rain began documenting the native ecosystem of Ugwar 6, picking up the ecological work he had abandoned years ago. What had initially appeared to be a barren landscape revealed itself to be teeming with life, just at a different scale than human eyes typically noticed. Microscopic organisms in the soil were slowly transforming the moon's surface, breaking down minerals and creating conditions for larger plants to take root. "It's healing itself," Rain explained to Ilara as they examined samples in the small analysis unit he'd salvaged. "The mining operations damaged the ecosystem, but it's adapting, finding a new balance." "Like us," Ilara observed thoughtfully. Rain smiled at the comparison. "Yes, exactly like us." Their relationship evolved naturally, without urgency. Physical differences became points of fascination rather than barriers. Rain marveled at the way Ilara's skin changed hues with her emotions, shifting from deep blue when calm to vibrant turquoise when excited. Ilara was endlessly curious about Rain's hair, the texture of it unlike anything in Miari physiology. One evening, as they sat watching the gas giants rise, Ilara placed Rain's hand against her abdomen. He felt a subtle movement beneath his palm. "Life," she said simply. "New one." Rain stared at her in wonder. We're... Ilara nodded, her skin flushing to a bright, joyful blue-green. "Yes, not possible. Scientists say, different species. But happening." Rain was speechless. The implications were enormous, not just for them personally, but for what it meant about Miari and human compatibility. It challenged everything the colonial scientific establishment had claimed about interspecies reproduction. "Are you happy?" Ilara asked, a note of uncertainty in her voice. Rain pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers in the Miari gesture of deep affection she had taught him. "I've never been happier," he whispered. "Never." The months passed, and Ilara's pregnancy progressed without complications. They prepared as best they could, converting a corner of their living module into a nursery space. Rain rigged a special bathing pool, knowing that Miari infants needed to be partially immersed in water for the first phase of their development. As Ilara's time drew near, they discovered another miracle. The first native plants large enough to be visible without magnification had begun to sprout near their settlement. Tiny, tentative green shoots pushing up through the dusty soil, reaching for the distant sun. "Seeds dormant long time," Ilara said as they knelt to examine the new growth. "Wait for right conditions. Now wake up." Rain recognized the species from his analysis work, a pioneer plant designed to stabilize soil and fix nitrogen, creating conditions for other species to follow. "It's the beginning of a new ecosystem," he said. "These plants will change the soil, make it possible for others to grow." "Should we plant our seeds here?" Ilara asked, referring to the collection of earth plant seeds they had been saving, uncertain if they should risk them in the harsh outdoor environment. Rain considered the question. Not to preserve them, he decided, but to grow them, to see what happens. And so they did, planting a small garden beside the native shoots, not in a controlled environment like the hydroponics bay, but in the actual soil of Aguar 6. It was an experiment, a hope, a statement of faith in the future. That night, a rare weather phenomenon occurred, a gentle precipitation of ice crystals that melted as they touched the ground, creating a brief, misty rain. Alara stood outside, face turned upward, letting the moisture settle on her skin. Her gills fluttered with pleasure, absorbing the precious water.
I feel like coming home, she said when Rain joined her. Not same home as before. New home, but still home.
Rain wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hands resting on the swell of her abdomen where their impossible child grew. Home is where we make it, he said. Together. The crystal rain continued to fall softly around them, nourishing the seeds they had planted, both in the soil and in their lives. On this forgotten moon at the edge of colonized space, something new was taking root. A family, an ecosystem, a future neither of them could have imagined alone. As the gas giant rose on the horizon, painting the landscape in amber light, Rain and Alara stood as living testament to a simple truth, that even in the harshest environments, life finds a way to flourish. And sometimes, the most beautiful growth comes after the most devastating losses. In the quiet between the stars, far from the systems and structures that had nearly destroyed them both, they had found not just survival, but a chance to thrive, to become more than memories or statistics, to be real, to be present, to be alive. And as the first green shoots pushed through the once barren soil of Aguar 6, they too put down roots, creating a home where none had existed before, writing a new story on the blank page of an abandoned world.